My name is Mandira. Welcome to AglaSem, and today we are going to be studying Class 11, Chapter 3, Biological Basis of Behavior. Now this chapter deals with a bit of bio stuff that is involved in psychology. So how the brain works, what are the structures inside the brain, what are the kind of cells that are inside the brain. But don't worry, you don't need any kind of specific scientific knowledge or just, shout out to humanities students. Don't think that science people have an advantage or anything. इसमें इस चैप्टर में ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. We have studied all this until class 10 and whatever is extra, they are also studying right now only. So you don't need science to study this chapter. All you need is your book. So let's get started with it. The first heading of the chapter is evolutionary perspective. Evolution, what does that mean? As we read in earlier classes as well, evolution refers to gradual and orderly biological changes that result in a species from pre-existing forms in response to changing adaptational demands of the environment. Now, what does that mean? That means that as we grow as a species, not just as people, Homo sapiens hai, iske baad maybe we'll become a more advanced species, right? So as we grow as a species, there are certain variations that occur in the genetic structuring of our body, in our brains, in our systems, nervous systems, all kinds of things, because of external environmental demands. For example, abhi coronavirus hai. You can think that, that is also kind of an external demand. So whatever features in our body can respond the best to external threats, the new external threats, will be kept within us, and those which are not will be completely eliminated or at least reduced in the next generations. Now, this process takes a very, very long time to occur. So don't think that it will happen within one generation or within one, a span of 100 years or so. So, the process, as I said, कि जो चीजें हमारी काम की है that are helping us adapt will be kept on. And this process is called natural selection. So, obviously, as all of you must have read that we as humans, as Homo sapiens, have developed a lot from where we were before. Iske pehle we were Neanderthals, very roughly speaking, and then we have evolved into Homo sapiens. So, what is the difference between Neanderthals, perhaps, or species that we were even before that, and Homo sapiens? There are two major differences. One is the bigger and developed brain with increased capacity for cognitive behaviors like perception, memory, reasoning, problem solving, and the use of language and communication. And the second one is the ability to walk upright, do पैरों पे चलने की ability. And the third one is, there are three, free hand with a workable opposing thumb. These features have been with us for several thousand years. So that's the kind of, time span that we're talking about. So of course, एक तो हमारा brain capacity बड़ा है, हमारा brain size में भी बड़ा है from Neanderthals. And why? Because we need extra, stuff in our brain to access memory, to, be better at cognitive stuff like that. So that is the reason. Then obviously we have the ability to walk upright. And the last one, as it said, we have a thumb, opposing thumb. मतलब fingers से ऐसे perpendicular है ना thumb almost. So it is an opposing thumb, which helps us write and, make, weapons, make certain kind of machinery. For example, wheel हमने invent किया है. So that is because of this thumb that we have, or writing that we do is because of the thumb. So now brain तो हमारा बड़ा है, but why? As I said, because we need more cognitively complex and we need more memory capacity. लेकिन which section of the brain has grown the most, or what is it about brain that has grown, that we are going to study in this chapter. So this is a very important question. The weight of our brain is about 2.35% of the total body weight, and it is the highest among the species. Now you might imagine that an elephant is pretty big, but if you calculate the proportion of his brain to his body, it's only 0.2%. So that's how we have come. Our brains have really grown. So the next heading is biological and cultural roots. Exactly. So biological reasons तो हैं जिसकी वजह से we have grown, and there are also cultural reasons. Earlier times में we did not require that big of a brain because most of the work was done by hunting and gathering and all those kinds of things. Now we have to sit, we have to study, we have to graduate, we have to get a job. All these kind of mental capacities and social cultural effects that have come into play actually requires a bigger brain, a more complex brain. Now let me tell you this fun fact that's not mentioned in the book, but because our brain is bigger and because it has, more complexity, it actually is very energy requiring. So a lot of your oxygen and your glucose jo bhi aap, in short jo aapki energy hai, a big percentage of it goes to your brain. So naturally we have to justify why we are affording such an expensive machinery in our head. So for that, let's answer the questions about what is the brain made of, what does it consist of. So the next heading is biological basis of behavior, which is also the name of the chapter, and the first subheading is neuron. Neuron, you must have heard, simply it is called the brain cell. So it is the basic unit of the nervous system. Ye fill in the blanks mein bahut aata hai. Blank is the basic unit of our nervous system. Please remember that it's a neuron. And it possesses unique properties of converting various forms of stimuli into electrical impulses. Whatever, if you are tapping, I'm touching this book, am I holding this pen, I'm doing anything, all that kind of information is converted into electrical signals, and that is processed by the neurons. So nearly there are 12 billion neurons, just to give you an estimate. Now the neuron consists of further subtypes. Uske na, jaise aapne ek picture zarur dekhi hogi NCERT mein. It is a bit like a star-shaped kind of thing, multiple faces of a star, like that. So it contains a lot of subparts. So its body is called the soma. The nucleus is the center, as you must have read. Dendrites hoti hain wo wali branches that are coming off of a neuron, and these dendrites are actually perhaps one of the most important parts of the cell, because they really help in signal transmission. So these are specialized structure emanating from the soma, that is the body of the cell. Now the receiving ends of a neuron वो एक dendrites के ही होते हैं, of course जो signal snap करेगा वो वाला भी. So the function of a neuron is basically to receive incoming neural impulses from adjacent neurons, of a dendrite. So dendrites, as I said, most important है because transmission of information में it is very important. तो एक तो उसको receive करना, it has to receive incoming neural impulse from the adjacent neuron directly to and it has to then transport it to the sense organ. So it's a very important part of the neuron. The next part is the terminal button, that is the axon, जो आपका axon है part का, that branches into the terminal buttons. वो buttons होते हैं, and they are also very important again for the transmission of information. एक neuron से दूसरी neuron को information conduct करने के लिए, they are very important. Now I use the word axon, but I'm going to define it now. So bundles of nerves को आप कह सकते हो, basically axons are bundles, of nerves. In short, you can say, to make it easy, in NCERT it's given as the conduction of information from one place to another in the nervous system is done through nerves, which are bundles of axons. So that's great. And basically they are of two types. I am talking about nerves, not axons. They are sensory or motor. So sensory, as you can, they're also called afferent. The name also suggests it carries information from sense organs to the central nervous system. And on the other hand, if you look at efferent nerves with an E, then they carry information from the central nervous system to the muscles or the glands. So these are the two kinds of nerves that we have. Let's talk about a nerve impulse, which is the next subheading. So information travels within the nervous system in the form of a nerve impulse. Impulse matlab you can understand it as a stimulus कि कोई ना कोई change हुआ है, एक impulse आया है, ठीक है, like an electrical impulse. I mean that is a good analogy. So electrical changes that happen in a neuron, उसकी वजह से ही electrical signals एक neuron से दूसरे neuron को transmit होते हैं. So the fact that I am talking, right, my brain is actually sending me electrical signals to my muscles, probably my this area wala muscles. So I am actually talking, right, or all the words that I'm speaking out, all the structure of sentences that I'm speaking out, it's only due to those electrical impulses that is happening. Now, one of the questions is about threshold. कि कितना बड़ा nerve impulse हमें करना पड़ेगा for information to be transported, right? So, अगर मेरे को, if I want to clap my hand like this, so what is the minimum level of threshold I have to cross? So, one important principle here is that the brain works on all or none principle. इसका मतलब ये है that either an electrical impulse will be generated or it won't be generated. ऐसे नहीं है that half an impulse is generated or half a signal was transmitted. So there is a minimum level of cutoff that you need to cross if you want a nerve impulse to be generated or the signal to be transmitted. Okay. So the next subheading is that of the synapse. Synapse is very important, very easily confused term. So synapse basically क्या होता है? Synapse is it's basically useful in making functional connections, right? Or basically ये dendrite synapse is, I used to study it as the little gap between the two neurons, and जिसकी वजह से electrical impulse has to be transmitted from one neuron to another, or this gap can also be called the synaptic cleft. So wait, let me explain that again. So in the basically one neuron faithfully relays any kind of information to the neighboring neuron, right? The axon tip of a preceding neuron make functional connections or synapse with dendrites of the other neuron. So okay, maybe you can understand the gap as the synaptic cleft, और जो connection बना रहा है, that the fact one neuron का जो end part है वो दूसरे neuron के starting part से connection बना रहा है, that is the synapse, right? So yeah, excuse me for that because that is the synaptic. The gap is the synaptic cleft. Now, the conduction of neural impulse in the axon is electrochemical in nature, while the synaptic transmission is totally chemical. Well, I'll give you an example. In a lot of mental disorders like depression, anxiety, there is an excess or a shortage of chemicals that transmit these kind of chemicals की बात कर रहे हैं उसकी कभी-कभी कमी हो जाती है. Those are called neurotransmitters. So for example, in depression, one of the chemicals that has been really associated with depression is serotonin. So serotonin की deficiency से a lot of people, it is claimed that depression, you are more likely to have depression. So when आप समझ लीजिए कि एक तरीके से एक न्यूरॉन और दूसरे न्यूरॉन के बीच का जो इंजन ऑयल है वो खत्म हो गया, तो इलेक्ट्रिकल ट्रांसमिशन जो है वो it will be more difficult, or less synapses or basically will be generated. If less synapses are generated, then the signal is not strong enough. So since serotonin is responsible for attention, to some extent it is responsible for motivation as well. इसीलिए जो लोग डिप्रेस पेशेंट्स होते हैं क्योंकि उसमें impulses ठीक से strongly enough नहीं हो पा रहे हैं generate, इसीलिए उनको थोड़ा low feel होता है and that kind of problems arise. So I hope you have understood this with the help of an example. Let's come to the next main heading, which is structure and functions of the nervous system and the endocrine system, as well as their relationship with behavior and experience. काफी लंबी heading है. That's all right. So इसमें दो systems की बात हुई है. First of all is the nervous system, and the second is the endocrine system, which we will discuss in detail. First of all, let's talk about the nervous system. Nervous system के there is a beautiful diagram given in NCERT, which is over here. It is very good because it really tells you the classification of nervous system and कैसे काम करता है. So don't get too intimidated by new terms. Don't worry, we will get to each and every term, and if I miss out anything, you can always tell me in the comment section. So first of all, neurons के दो subdivisions होते हैं. Central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. मतलब बस जो main organs हैं, brain and spinal cord, that will come in the central nervous system. कहते हैं ना, something is of central importance. तो brain और spinal cord are the main things. तो central nervous system में आ गए. And peripheral nervous system is neural tissues हैं outside brain and spinal cord. All the little nerves that we have. Basically, technically speaking, जो सारा काम कर रहे हैं वो peripheral nervous system ही कर रहे हैं. But main जो generator हैं, signals के, या जो main एक relay है, that is brain and spinal cord. So again, under peripheral nervous system there is somatic and autonomic. Under autonomic there is sympathetic and parasympathetic. Don't worry, एक एक करके हम सब करेंगे. So first of all, let's get on to peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system is composed of all the neurons and nerve fibers that connect the CNS to the rest of the body. So brain and, as I said, सारा काम वही कर रहे हैं. Brain और spinal cord को जो rest of the body से connect करते हैं, those neurons, those nerve fibers, basically they form the peripheral nervous system. Okay, it is of two types, that is autonomic and somatic. So first of all, let's study the first subdivision, that is somatic. So somatic nervous system consists of two types of nerves, cranial nerves and spinal nerves. Now, just as a hint, I'm telling you, cranial word जब भी आप सुनोगे, that will always be related to the brain, right? So क्योंकि cranium, आपने पढ़ा होगा, there is a structure in the brain, because the term is derived from that word. So एक तो brain की nerves हो गई और एक spinal nerves हो गई in somatic nervous system, right? There are 12 sets of cranial nerves which either emanate from or reach different locations of the brain, and there are three types of cranial nerves: सेंसरी, मोटर एंड मिक्स्ड। सेंसरी मतलब जो सिर्फ सेंसेशन को असेस करती है, मोटर जो आपको बेसिकली मसल फाइबर्स तक जाके हाथ वाथ हिलाने के लिए सिग्नल देती है। सो सेंसरी नर्व्स कलेक्ट सेंसरी इंफॉर्मेशन फ्रॉम रिसेप्टर्स, हेड रीजन, विजन रीजन, बेसिकली 5 सेंसेस के बारे में पढ़ा था हमने 3rd 4th स्टैंडर्ड में। तो इन सब से अगर आपने कोई चीज टच करी, कोई टेस्ट करी, कोई आपने स्मेल करी, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल सेंसरी रिसेप्टर्स उसको अडेप्ट कर लेंगे एंड दे विल कैरी द सिग्नल विद देम टू द ब्रेन। मोटर नर्व्स क्या कैरी करते हैं? इंपल्सेस ओरिजिनेटिंग फ्रॉम द ब्रेन टू द मसल्स। अब फॉर एग्जाम्पल आपने, आई नो लॉट ऑफ यू मस्ट लव मोमोज, राइट? सो अगर आपको मोमोज की चटनी की स्मेल आ रही है, first of all your nose will inhale that chutney smell, right? And then because it's really spicy you might cough or sneeze as well, and then your brain will recognize, oh, this is something I love, right? So that will क्या करेगा वो? फटाफट से आपके hand को एक signal भेज देगा that pick up the momo, dip it in the chutney and put it in your mouth. So this is a simple example of how this nerve system works, motor nerves and जो हमारी sensory nerves है, ठीक है? तो अच्छा, इसमें बहुत प्रोफेशनल एग्जाम्पल दिया हुआ है that eyeballs for example are controlled if you are rolling your eyes on somebody, then yes, that is somatic nervous system. So mixed nerves वो होती हैं जो दोनों काम करती हैं, sensory भी and to some extent motor भी काम करती हैं. So this is basically spinal. Then there are sensory fibers of the spinal nerves contain sensory information from all over the body except for head region where they are carried out to the and then basically and when they are carried out to the brain. So जो cranial nerves है, as I said, cranial word ही आपका brain से connected है. Spinal nerves तो आपको पता है spinal cord से. So spinal nerves collect sensory information from all over the body except the head region. They won't go there because that's cranial nerves, and send them to the spinal cord from where they are and then they are carried out in the brain. So अभी हम पढ़ेंगे एक reflex action के बारे में, जिसके बारे में आपने शायद पहले भी पढ़ा होगा. A lot of decisions like nervous system के जो है that are taken by the spine as well as the brain. Next we come to the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system में क्या है? It controls internal functions such as breathing, blood circulation, salivation, stomach contraction, emotional reactions. So आपने इसको याद करने के लिए this is a very good strategy. Autonomic basically sounds like automatic. So you can kind of assume that all these, not all, but like most of these processes that it's doing are the ones that are happening automatically. For example, this is a conscious movement, but the fact that my heart is beating when I'm doing this conscious movement is involuntary, right? It is automatically happening. So my autonomic nervous system is responsible for that. Now, autonomic is further divided into two parts, sympathetic and parasympathetic. So sympathetic, again, you can learn it. I'm telling you a lot of learning techniques in this chapter because it's mostly I think a lot of people face problem in कि इस word को इससे कैसे याद रखें या how to remember the function of any kind of nervous system, which is where all the questions are based. तो sympathetic से ना आप SOS याद कर लो. SOS means emergency. Okay, कुछ ऐसा है जो कुछ गड़बड़ हो गई है, so we need some kind of support, right? And parasympathetic is just a chill one. So that is the opposite of sympathetic. So they both work together to maintain a state of equilibrium, मतलब balance बनाने के लिए. Sympathetic deals with emergencies, SOS, as I said. S for sympathetic, S for SOS. अगर आपको कोई fight or flight response लेना है, for example, if you are walking on the road and you are crossing the road just like that, and suddenly a car comes and just stops right in front of you, and your heartbeat starts getting faster, you start sweating, then all this is happening because the sympathetic nervous system came into play. Because it was like, oh my god, emergency, probably car is going to crash into you. That's why. Okay, the parasympathetic nervous system is concerned with the conservation of energy. So जब emergency over हो जाएगी, when you will be calmed down that okay, I survived this mini accident sort of thing, then it is the responsibility of the parasympathetic nervous system to get things back to normal. That's what the main kind of functions are. Now let's move on to the next heading, that is the central nervous system. Central nervous system only consists of two things, brain and spinal cord. So an adult brain weighs about 1.3 kg and contains 100 billion neurons. So excuse me for a second. So let's study, as I said in the starting, the structure of the brain. So it can be divided into three parts. Hind मतलब हमेशा it refers to the back of something, right? Hind mirror कहते हैं ना गाड़ी में. Hind brain, mid brain and forebrain, right? So hind brain क्या होता है? It consists of I think 4 structures. Yes. So hind brain is mostly to do with involuntary actions, if I'm not wrong, but mostly, not always. So for example, hind brain में first है medulla oblongata. So that is the lowest part of the brain and it is in continuation to the spinal cord. मतलब medulla के बाद सीधा connection में ही spinal cord शुरू हो जाती है. So it contains breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, involuntary. And the second one is pons. Pons contain auditory signals that are relayed by our ears. It is believed that pons are involved in sleep mechanism, particularly the sleep characterized by dreaming. Kind of जो एक REM sleep patterns होते हैं, वो उसके pons are concerned there. Cerebellum, as you know, posture and equilibrium of the body. The main function is coordination of muscle movements. Okay, so these are the three parts of the hind brain. पीछे वाला जो brain है हमारा. Next comes midbrain. Midbrain में there is an important part about reticular activating system or RAS, which is responsible for arousal. Arousal मतलब alert रहना. So basically any kind of sensory input you have, it makes us alert by regulating those sensory inputs. कुछ touch किया, कुछ आपने exactly as I said, you were sniffing momo chutney, so it is really making you alert to the different kind of stimuli in your environment. And the most important one is the forebrain, because ये जो midbrain और hindbrain is mostly associated with involuntary kind of blood pressure हो गया, balance हो गया और sleep हो गया, right? But and midbrain is just alert रहना, but forebrain जो है that does all the thinking, everything, cognitive, emotional, motor activities, conscious decision making. मतलब things we are thinking about and then doing, like like I'm taking this class or you are attending this class. I always give this example that you are attending this class, it's a conscious decision, so it's probably taken by a forebrain. So it has a lot of parts. First part is the hypothalamus. It is basically a small structure and it regulates physiological processes involved in emotional and motivational behavior such as eating, drinking, sleeping, temperature, sexual arousal. It regulates controls internal environment of the body, heart rate, blood pressure, temperature. तो थोड़ा बहुत काम involuntary ये भी कर रहे हैं, लेकिन eating, sleeping, drinking, this is all kind of voluntary, जो आप अपनी मर्जी से कर रहे हो, right? It's that kind of action. So the next one is thalamus. It is basically a cluster of neurons situated in the ventral side of the hypothalamus. So incoming sensory signals from sense organs, and it basically receives all of them and sends them to appropriate parts of the cortex. It's like a junction. So एक यहाँ से sensory junction बना हुआ है, यहाँ से sensory signals आ रहे हैं and you send them to appropriate part. Language है तो language वाले cortex में भेज दिया. अगर आपका कोई olfactory signal है smell वाला तो उसके part में भेज दिया. All that kind of junctioning is done here. Limbic system is part of the old mammalian brain. Sorry. It basically internal homeostasis करता है by regulating temperature, blood pressure and blood sugar levels. And then next comes cerebrum. Cerebrum is actually the part that grew the most. That is the essential difference between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. So it is the part that regulates higher cognitive functions such as attention, perception, learning, memory, language, behavior, reasoning, problem solving. So if you're taking an exam or reading a chapter or kind of studying anything else, cerebrum is used. Even watching a documentary on Netflix or just your favorite TV show requires the use of cerebrum because it also controls attention. So cerebrum is divided into two symmetrical halves called the cerebral hemispheres. One left hemisphere and right hemisphere. I think this is lingo that you must have heard. So left hemisphere controls language and behavior and right controls images, spatial and pattern recognition. Okay. So these two hemispheres, this is a very important one, are connected by a bundle of myelinated. Myelin basically, they're just throwing their terms and they're not explaining, but I'll do it. Myelin is basically a layer that is on each neuron. Okay, and basically it is like a layer that helps in the conduction of signals. तो जब myelin कम हो जाता है तो हमारी body में different types of diseases can occur. For example, I think if I'm remembering it correctly, multiple sclerosis is one of the problems that happens with the lack of demyelination of मतलब myelin हटने लग जाता है neurons का. This is that conduction sheet. तो myelin fibers की एक layer होती है that is called corpus callosum that carries messages back and forth between the hemisphere. It is like a, आप समझ लो कि एक division half में जो है उसके बीच का junction है right and left में communication के लिए. Corpus callosum. Please remember this. It will always show up in your exam. The frontal lobe now, the cerebral cortex, right और left hemisphere तो clear हो गए, but इसमें चार type के lobes भी होते हैं. So the first lobe is the frontal lobe. जो भी frontal होगा ना, forebrain, frontal brain, that will always be connected to attention, thinking, memory, learning, reasoning, etc. Okay. The parietal lobe is mainly concerned with cutaneous sensations and coordination with visual and auditory sensations, देखने वाली और सुनने वाली sensations को coordinate करने का. Temporal lobe is primary auditory information. Temporal से आपको I think idea लग जाना चाहिए that it is auditory information. Occipital is visual. Again, these are literally, I mean, temporal जो होता है, tempo होता है ना, जैसे कि music में there is a tempo, so you can understand कि ये auditory information से related होगा. Occipital में भी, I think you must have read occipital signals in biology class 10, तो वो visual information के लिए. Okay. Next we come to the spinal cord. Now, what is the role of the spinal cord? It is basically a really, basically association of neurons, बहुत important है. One end is connected with the medulla and other end is at the tail. So it carries sensory impulses coming from lower parts of the body to the brain. अगर आपको पैर में दर्द हो रहा है and that pain information needs to be transported, तो वो करेगी. And it performs simple reflexes that do not involve the brain. You must have read this example that if you touch a really hot surface and then you immediately take your hand off it, या फिर अगर आपको कोई कांटा चुभा है, if you've poked a spiky surface, then you immediately take your hand off, right? And you don't have enough time for it to bleed in your hand or for a hand to get burned. तो इतना time नहीं होता है, so the signal doesn't go to the brain, it just goes to the spinal cord. Spinal cord quickly takes the decision and you remove the hand. Okay. Next we come to the endocrine system. So endocrine system, the first thing you think is hormones. That's correct. Hormones are circulated by the bloodstream. अच्छा, endocrine system और nervous system में एक complementary relationship है. It means that nervous system तो अपना काम कर ही रहा है, but endocrine system is actually very efficient in sending quick signals. तो blood stream में क्योंकि अगर मिलके कोई signal जाएगा तो वो quicker पहुंचेगा. So that's why they have a very brother sister kind of relationship. They are helping each other out. Okay, so in basically the endocrine system, the first gland that we are going to study is pituitary gland. Pituitary gland secretes the growth hormone and many other hormones which direct and regulate secretions of many other endocrine glands found in the body. So it is also called the master gland. Don't confuse this with hypothalamus. It is always the pituitary gland that is the master gland. Okay, because of course that is not even a gland, the other one, but for some reason a lot of people confuse it there. So pituitary gland is concerned with growth. So height वगैरह जो होती है हमारी, it also controls different kinds of hormones. So it is the master gland because it is controlling other glands also sometimes. The next is the thyroid gland. Thyroid आपने बहुत बार सुना होगा कि उनका thyroid बढ़ गया है. It is basically producing thyroxine that influences body's metabolism rate. Optimum amount of thyroxine is basically very optimum for the body. एक अच्छा optimum amount होना चाहिए. Hypothyroidism भी नहीं होना चाहिए. It means less thyroxine has been secreted. Hyper भी नहीं होना चाहिए. So more than required. So it maintains the production of energy consumption of oxygen and eliminates wastes in the body. कहते हैं ना किसी को thyroid की problem हो, so maybe they tend to gain weight. So because it is affecting your metabolism, waste नहीं निकल रहा या intake में problem है, digestion में उस kind of oxygen generation में, energy generation में problem है, थका रहना probably are signs of a thyroid problem. Then there is adrenal gland, which is our most favorite gland because it is again the emergency one. So adrenal cortex and adrenal medulla, दो parts इसमें mention किए गए हैं. Very important name and very complicated also. ACTH. So it is adrenocorticotropic hormone that is secreted by anterior pituitary gland, and the adrenal cortex also secretes a group of hormones called corticoids. Sorry, I was going to say corticosteroids. It's corticoids. So which are utilized by the body for a number of physiological purposes, regulation of minerals, potassium, chloride, etc. अब adrenal में सबसे ज़्यादा interesting बात ये है कि ये दो hormones secrete करता है, epinephrine और norepinephrine. They are for sympathetic activation. So sympathetic क्या था? SOS activation. तो कहते हैं ना कि if you need some sort of adrenaline in your life, then go ride a roller coaster, right? So adrenaline means sympathetic. आपको कोई ना कोई ऐसी activity करनी पड़ेगी where you have to evaluate your fight or flight chances. So increase in heart rate, oxygen consumption, metabolic rate high हो जाना, and muscle tone. All these are secretions of these epinephrine and norepinephrine, which are under the adrenal gland. The next one comes pancreas. Pancreas helps in the digestion of food, also secretes a hormone called insulin. This again is associated with diabetes. So अगर आपको if there is a problem with there's two kinds of diabetes, type 1 and type 2, which happen because either your body is producing less insulin than usual, or there's a production and insulin problem, तो digestion कम हो रहा है. So जैसे कहते हैं ना sugar बढ़ जाना, that is because of the pancreas. It's not working properly. Some people also have a genetic problem in which their cells are not that responsive to sugar or glucose in the body. So that is different kinds of diabetes are discussed. It's not important, so you can skip that part. The next one is the gonads. The gonadotropic hormone, or the GTH, is secreted by anterior pituitary. Again, as you can see, I'm going back to pituitary. Adrenal bhi pituitary secrete kar raha hai. Gonadotropic hormone bhi pituitary secrete kar raha hai. That's why its pituitary gland is called the master gland. So always remember that. So gonadotropic mein ovaries hoti hai. Females mein they produce estrogens and progesterone. These are the two kind of main hormones that regulate periods, that regulate all kinds of pregnancies. There are different levels में पाई जाती हैं, different stages पे in a woman's cycle. Secondary sexual characteristics like breast development, rounded body contours, widened pelvis, all these things are happening because of these two hormones. In males, it is the production of testosterone, जो beard आपकी आ रही है, that's why testosterone, deepening of voice, and growth of facial and body hair, as I said, physical changes, and a bit of increased aggression. It's because of the testosterone. If you go to the gym, I think you will be very much, you would know a lot about how they tend to give a lot of testosterone boosting medication for body growth. So always check before using them. Tip. The next topic, the main topic that we're going to come to, is hereditary, and that is involving genes and behavior. So इसमें genetics की बात होगी. Genetics मतलब जो हमारी अंदर का genes है हमारी inside the cell, what role they are playing, what kind of disorders we can inherit, what kind of traits we can inherit from our parents, all those kind of things. So the first thing we are going to talk about is the chromosome. Chromosome क्या होता है? These are thread-like paired structures in the nucleus of each cell. So there are 23 pairs, right? 46 chromosomes होते हैं. We take 23 from each parent when we are born. But उसमें से, as you must have read, that there is one pair, the 23rd pair जो होता है हमारा, उसमें we take X from our mother, but whether we take X or Y from our dad, because he has an XY, so we can either take X or take Y, that will determine our gender, right? So if I've taken, for example, I have taken X from my dad, so I'm a girl now, and someone who has taken Y will be male. Chromosomes are composed mainly of the substance called DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. So that is basically full of DNA जो हमारे chromosomes होते हैं, and that contains very complex information about how our genetic makeup, कि हमारा face कैसा होगा, eyes किस color की होंगी. आपने जरूर सुना होगा attached और detached earlobe होता है ना, कि if this earlobe is detached or attached is also genetically determined. So that kind of information, and other information that is much useful than this, is all contained there. So again, ऐसा हमने evolution में भी पढ़ा था, as I told you, that if our genes are changing in response to the external environment, then they are mutating. इस process को we call it mutation. Don't worry too much about it. Let's move on to the next heading, cultural basis, socio-cultural shaping or of behavior. So genetic makeup though, it's fine that we are inheriting something from our father, our mother, and all those kind of genetic things are happening. But where we grow up, the culture that we grow up in, these play a very, very, very important role in determining who we become as human beings. So hormones and all these biological stuff that we read until now is of importance, but you cannot study it in isolation. ऐसा नहीं है कि अगर मेरे पास एक certain gene है, then I will 100% become a psychologist, 100% be a nice person, empathetic person. No, you have to. There is a whole interactionist approach that is going on. कि एक culture and जो एक psychological environment है, जो social environment है, all those kinds of come together to predict the kind of person you are, your life choices, and whatever challenges you have to face across your lifespan. So हम culture की बात करते रहते हैं. What is culture? a lot of people say that culture provides meaning by creating different categories, है ना, like social categories जो होती है हमारी marriages, roles, but होता क्या है culture? Culture is one of the only man-made environment that we have. So it is the man-made part of the environment in the sense that जो चीजें हमने अपने environment में settle करके we are learning and those things are shaping us, that becomes part of the culture. So for example, Indian culture में if you see, then there is certain kind of emphasis on parental attachment, on grandparents के साथ भी हम लोग usually we are close. So all these kind of factors come under the cultural factors that we are growing up in. Then significant categories होती हैं, as I said before, इसकी for example marriage, and there are roles like for example bridegroom, आपकी अगर sister की wedding है, so you are playing a certain kind of role in that wedding if you are the so these are the kind of cultural meanings that are attached to how we grow up. ठीक है? So culture is the label for all the different features that vary from society to society. Again, ऐसा नहीं है that just because I'm in India, I have an understanding of different kind of cultures. Like for example, the culture in America or the culture in Australia or even in India. Actually, there are different kind of cultures. North India में एक अलग culture है and South India में अलग culture है. So it is a very relative term. ऐसा नहीं है कि एक country का एक ही culture होगा. Even one office can have two different kind of cultures. Okay, so अब ये culture एक पेरेंट से दूसरे पेरेंट पे ट्रांसमिट कैसे होता है, हाउ वी लर्न इट, दैट वी आर गोइंग टू लर्न द नेक्स्ट हेडिंग व्हिच इज इनकल्चुरेशन. Enculturation refers to all the learning that takes place without direct or deliberate teaching. We learn certain concepts and values simply because of their availability in the cultural context. For example, what is a vegetable? And let me give you an example. Actually, इसमें तो they are bland examples. Good example is bharta. So, what I mean by this is, what is bharta? Everyone, probably in North India and South India, know what is bharta. We know that, eggplant hai, there is a brinjal that is involved, and, you roast it or you boil it, and you make certain kind of dish with it. You put tomatoes and onions in it. Everyone has a different recipe. But as soon as I say bharta, you know that, this is, or as soon as I say bhindi, you know that, that is the green ladyfinger okra, wohi wali vegetable hai. So nobody has actually taught you ki, oh, इसको भरता कहते हैं, और not every child is taught like that. It's just something that your mom was saying, you were eating since you were a kid, so you learned its name. So it is not deliberately taught to you. So it refers to all the learning that occurs in human life because of its availability in the social context. Okay, so for example, as we say ki mehendi or haldi, all these kind of celebrations are there. So when you go and attend one, you okay, maybe to a certain extent they will teach you that, okay, we will apply the yellow kind of paste, turmeric paste on our cheeks or on the bride's cheeks. So all that is happening, but once you attend it, it becomes part of the availability hai culture. It becomes a part of the culture, so you learn it very automatically. Not, you don't have to be very very adamant about it. The addition of spices, for example, हम अपने खाने में बहुत सारी spices डालते हैं. When you go abroad, you realize that, oh, it's just salt and pepper for them, but we add a lot of spices, and it is so involuntarily added when we learn cooking that, again, it is an example of enculturation. Next comes socialization. Socialization is the process by which individuals acquire knowledge, skills, dispositions which enable them to participate as effective members of a group in society. So as you can see, it is not as automatic as enculturation. So, for example, language is a big part of socialization. The fact that I'm talking in English, I switch to Hindi. Beach mein I keep switching, or someone else might be talking in Malayali or in Bengali. All these are, language acquisition जो है वो आपके socialization का बहुत बड़ा part है. Because if I stop talking in English/Hindi, I mean, predominantly we come from Hindi-speaking backgrounds. So, अगर हमको हिंदी नहीं आती, then it will be very difficult for us to be accepted in the socio-cultural context. So, you know that to be effective members, definition देख लीजिए, to be effective members of groups and the society that we live in, we need to learn that kind of language. So, socialization agents क्या होते हैं? हमारे parents, teachers, friends, basically people who are primarily responsible for teaching us what's happening in the culture, or not teaching us, just जिनसे हम ऐसे सीख लेते हैं. Just as I said, bharta is probably a word that you learn from your mom or your dad, or you're a cook. So कभी कभी उसमें कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स भी होते हैं. सो ऑफ कोर्स in when we're learning something from our parents or when socialization is involved, maybe you don't agree with every cultural practice that happens in India, or sometimes people's own motives are sort of hidden under the term of cultural practice. So you can obviously change them, and you can add your own intellect and judge whether you want to practice a certain cultural tradition or any kind of thing or not. Okay, so socialization agents के बारे में अब हम थोड़ा डिटेल में बात करते हैं. First socialization agent that we talked about is our parents. So parents encourage certain behaviors by rewarding them verbally or in tangible ways. For example, probably respecting your grandparents, doing things for your grandparents is something that your parents have rewarded you with, or at least taught you. This is something you should be doing. Reward आपको एक chocolate के उसमें भी मिल सकता है, or it can be praise as well, right? And for example, misbehaving with domestic help is something that our parents really want to stop. So they will always scold us that don't do this, don't talk to people like that, or just anyone like that. Okay. So they are very important. They differ in the degree of acceptance and the degree of control. As you know, आपके बहुत सारे friends होंगे जिनके parents कुछ liberal होते हैं, कुछ बहुत strict होते हैं. So you know that acceptance भी parent to parent differ करती है, and degree of control also. Some parents want a lot of control on their children's life, and some are just chill with it. So next one is school. School में you learn a lot of things, social skills, even reading, writing, जो भी A to Z आपको primary school से या kindergarten से you learn until you pass your class 12th. It's all learned in the school. School का culture, school में जो भी आपको different kinds of friends you have, teachers you have, it forms a very important part of the socialization process. Third is peer group, your friends and people you study with, people you interact with, what kind of things they like. It affects the kinds of cultural bringing up that you have. The last one is media influences, and this is very relevant in today's context because it is full of social media is on its high right now. So whatever you watch there, as I said, I think in one of my previous videos I've mentioned this, the fact that you're looking at supermodels, the fact that girls are looking at filter full bodies of perfect looking people, the fact that boys are looking at really muscular men who seem to be very attractive to other people. All these are media influences that are affecting your self-concept, that are affecting the way you think about yourself and others. Last heading of the chapter is Acculturation. Yep, that's the last heading. It refers to cultural and psychological changes resulting from contact with other cultures. So, इस heading को आप इसी तरीके से याद रखिएगा that you move to another country or you go visit another country or another state. Okay? So, actually you can also imagine it as visiting another friend's house जिसके घर में आप पहले नहीं गए हैं, because हर घर का भी culture अलग होता है. But the country example is the most suited. So psychologists have widely studied how people psychologically change during acculturation, going to another culture, when two cultures mingle. So talking from my personal experience, I actually studied in Australia. So when I went there, it was a very different kind of culture. It's not that different, but yes, a lot of aspects of Australian culture is very different from Indian. So these are the kind of examples that you would be looking for if you are going to another country to visit, to study, to stay there, anything like that. So it's made based on positive or negative experiences that you have had there, or the positive or negative changes that happen when you go outside. Because as you know, language different hai, but here also we talk in English. So there are other changes other from other than language. Although there are some countries where language is also completely, if you visit Japanese culture, for example, Chinese culture, the languages are very different. So that is also one of the factors. But again, positive or negative आपका जो भी interaction वहाँ पे रहा है, उसके हिसाब से 4 acculturative strategies have been derived. First one is integration. Integration is when I am happy with my own culture and I want to maintain my identity as an Indian or as any kind of cultural group, member of any cultural group, but I also like the other culture. So while staying in daily interaction with another cultural group. So this is what I hope to get when I move to another country, that I want to maintain my own identity as an Indian, but then also go and interact with Australians, interact with their culture, mingle in their culture, right? This is one of the healthiest ways of dealing with contact from two cultures. Assimilation is an attitude in which people do not maintain to wish their own wish to maintain their own cultural identity. It means it doesn't matter to me whether being an Indian or having my Indian identity is of any kind of importance. I don't want to really get into that. I don't want my Indian identity. All I want to get to know is how Australians live, and I want to adapt their way of living. The third one is separation, in which people tend to maintain their own stance and they just do not interact with the foreign culture a lot. So, for example, a lot of Indians will only interact with Indians when they go abroad, or apne culture mein they will be there. I'll eat only certain kinds of foods. That kind of thing is separation, where you don't want to maintain contact with the other cultures out there. So marginalization is mujhe kuch bhi nahi chahiye. I don't want my Indian cultural identity. I also don't want to interact with other cultures. Just neither. Okay. So there is an important statement in page number 62 that while genes write the script of biological transmissions, memes write script of cultural transmission. See, this is not the millennial wali memes that we are referring to. This is actually a proper term. So understanding how genes mein hamari genetic information is being transported is important, and but along with that, it is also very important to understand how culture gets transmitted from one generation to another. So hopefully this chapter was able to teach you to get the best of both worlds. कि biological जो हमारी fixed kind of चीजें हैं उनको भी हम लोग we should appreciate them, we should learn about them, and also cultural changes which are in context. So you can also think of it as the debate between whether psychology is a natural science or a social science, जो हमने first chapter में किया था. So this is again that kind of dichotomy is referred to, and the answer is always it is both. So again, इसमें भी biological changes, natural scientific changes are important, as well as social scientific changes like culture. So I hope you got the best of both worlds with this chapter. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment box, and do subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much for listening to me.